hosted by Tony Gapperstone. Thanks for tuning in. It's showtime.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 202nd episode of the BraveMaker podcast. I have been off for a couple weeks after our film festival, but Tony Gapperstone here, pronouns he, him, his. I am an actor and a filmmaker based in the San Francisco Bay Area, specifically Redwood City, California. You can find me on the socials at Tony Gapperstone on my website, tonygap.com. But I'm really glad to be here today. I love doing this. We're now on Thursdays. So if you're an avid follower of the show, we're on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, just for a little change, try to change it up. It's always good season to season to change things up a little bit. But I am a Caucasian man with brown hair in my BraveMaker studio. It says BraveMaker in the back of me, my visual description, wearing yellow glasses today, and my You Are the Story shirt, which is our black iconic BraveMaker shirt that can be found on our website at bravemaker.com/merch. Today, we have a special guest, and I have a co-host today, which many of you will be familiar with. Our co-host, Priscilla Lamb. Welcome, Priscilla Lamb. How you doing?
Hey, everyone. I am Priscilla Lamb. I'm co-hosting the BraveMaker podcast today. I am a Black and Asian female. I have long black curly hair. I have a blue shirt on, and I have a fig tree behind me, also a mirror and white walls with some art on it. But I am grateful to be here today.
Heck yeah. We are fresh. I mean, it still feels super fresh. It's only been a little over 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, almost a month. Yeah, almost a month. We're not quite at a month since the film festival ended. We had our 5th annual film festival, July 13th through the 16th. So we have been catching up on rest and sleep and also trying to gear back up for all the things that are next, which we're excited to talk to you about. But for our 202nd episode, we have a producer who's making movies and making waves. We're very excited to welcome Yolanda T. COCHRAN to the show. Hi, Yolanda.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to let you do your visual description.
Yeah, I love this. Okay, two things. First off, you didn't tell me I was going to be jamming out to your music, your intro music. I was bopping around.
Okay.
I am a African-American female. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am wearing a black short sleeve top with a black hat and glasses and silver palm earrings. And my backdrop is my office, where I have a little bit of paraphernalia from my different films that I've worked on. And I just want to say that I love the fact that you guys make this kind of introduction to your audience.
You. We're learning. We're trying. That's for sure. This is good. All right. Well, we're excited. We got 45 minutes with you and so many questions. So Priscilla's going to kick it.
I'm going to jump right in.
Okay. Go ahead. Kick it, Priscilla.
So, Yolanda, if people don't know you, I just want to give a little highlights of your career by being like, you've been a VP at major studios as far as Warner Brothers, Disney, and producing some of our favorite movies, The Book of Eli. Like, my dad died when I said I was going to talk to you today because you were part. That's one of his favorite movies. You did The Blindside. You did Lottery Ticket, which was with Bow Wow. And
yes.
You've done so
people usually don't bring that one up, but yeah.
I was raised on that. So it's just like you've done so many. You produce so many movies and TV shows that are part of our lives. But it's interesting how you got your start. So you're from Texas. You found your way to California by attending college at USC.
Yep.
Unlike other filmmakers and people in the business who say, I've dreamed my whole life to become this, you had an interesting start. So please share with us what you went to college for and how that even intertwined into you getting into producing and filmmaking and independent film.
Yeah. Great question. We always have a different path. Like there's probably 1,000 different paths into the way we, find our entry into the business and what we end up doing. So I grew up in Houston, Texas, had no inclination, no knowledge, no awareness of the film and television business. And I always joke that when people ask me this question, I always say, it didn't even occur to me that there was this business. Like I always say, I guess I thought things just magically showed up in the movie theater or on television, and that there weren't people and all these people doing these jobs to make it happen. And the only reason that I became aware of it was because I went to school for accounting at USC. And that's how I started my career. I got my education, I got my degree in accounting. But while I was there, I ended up meeting a ton of people in theater arts and cinema and running around making student film and really loved it. So I started my actual job in accounting, but while I was doing that, nights and weekends, I was running around doing, independent film, shorts, low budget features, working in production. And so I really, really grew to love it. And I slowly transitioned from being an auditor of all things at at the time, big six accounting firm. Well, it was big eight anyway. And I decided, for a minute, I thought I wanted to be an AD, and I tried to apply to the DGA training program. They did not accept me. Big mistake on their part, not mine. I'm actually glad it didn't happen. And so I just kept doing production and producing things with friends, and meandered into, because I had the accounting background, I meandered into doing production accounting on features. And interestingly enough, although I had gone to school with a ton of friends who got their actual degree in cinema, I was one of the first of my group of friends to actually be working in the business, but in production accounting. So, and meanwhile, still doing production along with them. So yeah, and over the course of time, just really, I wanted to kind of remove myself from having so much of the finance piece and only focusing on production. And so, yeah, I eventually was able to do that.
I am smiling ear to ear. If you can't see me and you're listening to this, you want to see me. And I'm smiling ear to ear because I think your story is just so powerful in the fact that it highlights the journey of someone who doesn't necessarily is a director or an actor, but they have a love for film and that they can bring their business background to them. And it is show business, and a lot of us creatives, we need that business aspect. So to find someone who has a business background that you brought to your friend circle is very powerful and exciting. I'm smiling because also a lot of people do have 9-to-5 jobs and pursue their dreams. And
right.
Your story also gives hope and gives encouragement that, like, I took all the knowledge that I was getting in my 9-to-5 and applied it on my off time, and unknowingly for yourself, actually formed it into your long-term career, but just you maximizing your moments and even your no's working out to be your blessings for that program that didn't take you as the AD. But like seeing how everything unfolds, but there was nothing in vain in your early journey of your career.
1000%. Yep.
So Yolanda, your producing list, and Priscilla gave a few of those already, is so long, and you have these iconic films in your repertoire. And I love Book of Eli too. That was like such a cool movie.
It's one of my absolute favorites.
Is it? I mean,
yeah.
So I'm also a person of faith too, and it had this little kind of faith element in there. And I remember going like, "Ooh, I did not expect that." That was really, really cool. You have a Blindside poster hanging behind you.
Yeah.
I mean, these are huge films that you kind of found your way on producing. So, I mean, I just wonder, like, can you share some stories from the trenches? There's so many. I always like to hear, I consider myself a producer, but I also primarily like to write and direct, and I love a good producer. I love someone who can get stuff done and who knows how to solve problems. And the way that I connected with you, which we'll get to and eventually, is I was watching Project Greenlight, the new version, and you were a producer on Gray Matter. So there's so many things. So before I get ahead of myself, some stories from the trenches. Like, how did you know when you're like, oh my gosh, I know how to solve problems. I know how to work with directors and actors. I know how to do, because you do all things as a producer. You have to know how to do everything.
Absolutely.
So what are some of your favorite stories from these iconic movies? If Book of Eli was your favorite, what stands out?
Well, I'll tell you, related to The Blindside, that movie, I mean, Book of Eli was one of my favorites to make because I had such a reverence already for the filmmakers, the Hughes brothers. And it was wonderful to work with them and hear their stories and pay witness to the artistry that they brought to making that movie. And, you know, Denzel, I mean, come on. Consummate professional. It was great to watch him work too. So that's really like, that one holds in my heart as my favorite experience, I think, making films. But The Blindside has a special place because this movie came to us when I was at Alcon at the time. It came to us in a way because one of the associated producers, Molly Smith, knew the actual family.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, through agencies and so on and so forth, we found out about, you know, it was based on Michael Lewis's book. So in order to do that movie authentically, casting was essential because it's a human story. I mean, casting is always essential, but to really have that movie resonate well, we needed to put in those roles people who could convey the human story of that actual story, because it's based on true people, very well. Now, the lead role of Michael Orr, that's got to be somebody who has a certain physicality and who also can act, and probably is somebody that you might not know. So we had to go through a significant search to find this person, and populating that entire family was really, really an exercise in excellent casting. Once we found Quentin Aaron, who played Michael Orr, we had to then go through, as you can imagine, it's partly a football story. So there's a lot about, you know, choreographing and, you know, and shooting and preparing and showing the world of collegiate football. So that's a huge challenge. People have to make it convincing. You've got to be running plays. How are we going to do this? And Quentin wasn't a football player, even though he has big physicality, and he also didn't quite have the physicality we needed to portray the character yet. So there was an enormous amount of pre-production work that went into making sure that we could portray this story well from a physical standpoint and a casting standpoint. He went into a full regimen. You know, we had all kinds of trainers and dietitians and all these things, and we worked with a local college in the off season to run. You know, we had college football players who were, you know, like had done things and were not, you know, actually within a collegiate situation, but to run those plays and help us make everything convincing. And it was, but at the time, the reason I bring that up is you see the result. It's an iconic movie. It did exceptionally well at the box office. It's a lot of people's favorite movie. But as we embarked upon it and were, you know, putting in all this work and getting ready for it, we had no idea what it was going to turn into. Like, you know, you always go into something and you want to make it great and you hope it's going to be great. And even when you think it's great, you still have no idea how it's going to be received. And it was so gratifying to have it be so well received.
I want to jump in. Let me know if you want to answer. If you don't,
Sure.
Because right now with the strike, we get to kind of peel back the layers and see that for the writers, for actors, the lifestyle isn't as glamorous as we assumed it to be. Some of our favorite actors are on like network shows. Like we thought, maybe just me. I assume that they're rolling in dough. They're going to like fabulous parties. They're getting out. They're wearing the nicest branded clothes. If you could just speak to, as a producer, what does an average salary look like? What does the payout? How does that process work? How do we make money as producers? Because I'm assuming we have to fundraise to make money to make the movie.
Yeah. Well, you've either got to, you know, go out and, you know, raise financing privately, or if you're connected with the studio, then the studio will fund the movie, but then they have to believe in they have to say, okay, this is a movie we want to make, and here's how much we want to make it for. And it's never enough. It is never enough. it's always going to be like, okay, how are we going to figure out how to make it for this number that they've given us? That's always the case, which, by the way, you know what? That's fine, because it's not always fine. But in most cases, it's fine because, you know, I've had a lot of recent conversations about the amount of creativity that comes out of limitation. So you're never going to have the amount that you think you need or want to have for it. But then going back to the original train of thought about all of these artists who are doing this. I mean, all of your shooting crew, they make decent hourly wages because their unions have fought for it. However, you're not working all the time. So you might have big lulls in between when you're working. So when it averages out over the course of a year, you're not, rich and, living high on the hog. And the same is true, going back to your point of, our artists who are in front of the camera and actors. There are the A-list people who make, big salaries per film, millions or whatever, but that is actually very rare. It's not.
Okay.
And a lot of these actors who are those A-list people may potentially do a passion project, in which case that budget is too small for them to get the kind of salary you assume that they're getting. Aside from all of those people, everyone else, they're not working so regularly, and their salaries, per project are small. So, a lot of people might assume, they're millionaires or they're 100,000-aires. They're really not. And even people you might see regularly on TV as like, oh, I always see that person in a guest star role. That person is not making any money because they might be called, let's say they're a weekly player on a show. Let's say, rounding it out, their weekly salary for being on that show is $6,000. If they're a day player, I'm giving very round numbers here. If they're a day player, they're making $1,000 for that day. And they might work 2-3 days on that show. And then it might be forever till they get, and I think people aren't really taking into account that somewhere between 80 and 90% of SAG members not make the $26 minimum to get health insurance. That's crazy. People assume if you're an actor and I'm seeing you on TV, you're making all this money. It's just not the case. And I think that's probably a shock to some people if they're even paying attention.
That's a great moment to stop and just use some of those actual numbers. You're saying 85% of SAG, which is there's 160,000 people in SAG. Okay, 160,000 people. I'm one of them, and you have to make $26,000 a year to get insurance. That means $26,000 a year. That's not very much.
It's not much.
That's below poverty. Yeah. And 85% of us aren't getting enough annually with our acting salaries to be able to get health insurance. So that's why these strikes, just side note, actors have been striking since July 12th, and our WGA friends have been striking for over 100 days now. We stand in solidarity with you all as you fight. And, I know all three of us on here, know the artist journey, how hard it is, and how people at the top with power tend to always benefit and oppress those who don't have the power, who are creating the things that we're putting out there. Which, Yolanda, I want to ask you, we were talking a little bit off podcast, but what are you seeing right now? What are some of the hopes you're having, as you're talking with friends in LA? Are there any kind of solutions that you're seeing or hoping are going to come besides obviously these contracts being signed? Or as a producer, what are you seeing, independent producer?
Sure. I'm a little bit of an outlier, maybe, because I am a producer, and I have spent also a good portion of my career as an inside studio production executive. So one might think that my opinion is different or counter to what it is, but my background is my family, like I said, I grew up in Houston, Texas. Many people in my family were members of the United Steelworkers Union. And so I grew up very union strong and believing very much in the unions and in the fact that, you know, any kind of progress or any kind of rights or any kind of upholding, you know, the working class has always come at struggle and demanding. It's no one's handing that out because it's the right thing to do. So it always comes at the hand of forcing the hand. So I have to say that I'm very pro-union, and so might be atypical to an inside studio person. I think directly from a producer standpoint, I am on the board of directors of the Producers Guild, and I can tell you that we are very much proponents of our sister guilds and unions, that they get a fair shake in this. And I think as producers, independent producers, you know, not tied directly within a studio type environment, we want to see good contracts come out of these negotiations. And when I say good contracts, I think what is happening in this moment is the fact that the contracts as they have been are very outdated to what our business looks like right now. And they've been outdated for a while, in my humble opinion. They've been outdated for probably 2 previous contracts. But it's taken the amount of time that it has for everybody to kind of observe the changes and see that the way our audiences get their entertainment is now very different. Mm-hmm. The way the studios are approaching that and serving their audience is different. How they're spending the money and where they're putting that entertainment is all very different. And quite frankly, you know, the conversation related to streaming versus television versus features is a relevant conversation because streaming does not operate the same as, say, features. You can't tie the revenue directly to the show in streaming like you can, say, at the box office. Mm. So that's fine. But that doesn't mean that just because it's different and it's more complex and it involves a different calculation, and that it might be hard, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing that. We absolutely should be doing it, and we absolutely should be compensating the artists who are contributing to the success of shows or whatever else, films that are, you know, propping up a streaming service or the like. So we just have to figure it out. I mean, those contracts have to catch up with the state of the industry that we're in now, as opposed to saying, oh, we're just going to keep giving a cost of living increase of 3%. No, that doesn't work.
We need to sit down and look at how we can line it up.
Yeah,
and I think one of the things that you talked about is how you've also been the in-studio producer for some of our favorite streaming platforms, really like corporates like Disney, Warner Brothers, and things like that.
Yeah.
Like VP level. But you also, like I've seen in your career, you've also left the corporate offices at times and freelance and started your own production service company. So like, can you speak to that a little bit of like, you really have been in both worlds throughout your career, and what made you like be brave enough to leave a steady corporate high level job and say, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to make my
job security.
Job security. Which is,
job security.
80% of us make less than the health insurance average. But we need another job. So for you to be brave enough and courageous enough to be like, I'm going to leave this cushion place where I'm living life. And making all these connections and all this networking opportunity and say, I'm going to do it on my own. Can you speak to that a little bit? That is so brave and different.
Yeah, that's a big question, Priscilla. You know, it's interesting. I think the answer to your question, when we first started talking, we talked about how I got my start in the business, and I came to California and I went to school for accounting, and then I met all these people in the film school and theater arts. And early on, there were a lot of people who said to me, you should be a producer. You should produce. You should. And I just thought probably, you know, the way I showed up in California, not even knowing such an industry existed and how it worked. At that time, I thought to myself, how would I even do that? Why would I do that? But I think I also knew enough about the role of a producer to recognize that it was a very hard job, particularly if you're, you know, well, it's hard all the time, but if you're trying to be a creative producer, there's no guarantees about anything, and you could be working forever and not get anywhere. And I was very much a person who I would like to see the fruits of my labor, and the idea of spending so much amount of time and not seeing the fruits of my labor was not something that I felt like was very desirable at all for me. Over time, what I learned was there just wasn't the set of projects that spoke to me personally that would make me want to put in that kind of commitment and that kind of sacrifice and that kind of jumping out into the uncertainty. And there came such times that those projects came into my life and my awareness, and that I started being interested in and really going after. And, you know, if I do something, I give it my 150% in my all. And I knew that that's what I would be doing. And so I suddenly had more than just one or two that I felt that strongly about, that I was going to go out on a limb. And, you know, they talk about like stepping off that cliff and not knowing that there's a net there. And I finally had that situation where my desire to and passion for these things outweighed any feelings that I had about security or, you know, the other things that the benefits of being in an in-house situation. Yeah.
That's cool, Yolanda. So Priscilla, by the way, is a great producer. She produces a lot of stuff up here, and I see that spirit, you know, that you have to have as someone who makes something come to life. Something, you know, the ideas, the kernels, the creative producing element. When you were saying kind of how you like to see the fruits of your labor, were you talking about as a creative producer, sometimes you're not making money a lot of times on that creativity, really, right? You're working a lot for free, which all of us up here in the Bay Area know. That's a huge part, and it's a challenging part. But on the seeing the fruits of your labor, was it kind of like a change in going, I need to see things bring to life. I need to make sure these things, is that kind of like the drive that you felt like was the change? Like you just didn't want to work and have it go nowhere. You actually wanted to see it on the screen. Is that kind of the thing you're talking about?
It was a little bit of that, but I think probably it also ties back to me having such a lack of awareness. I was very much I was a nerd. I was a blurred when I was a kid, very much a nerd. I went to a math and science magnet school. I actually was on a track to be a chemical engineer.
Wow.
I took 4 years of chemistry in high school. I still super love chemistry. I actually miss chemistry. I actually think about that sometimes now, talking to other people and other people's kids about chemistry. Like I loved it. And all my friends that I went to high school, they did kind of that thing. So my brain and kind of how I had a blue collar family, you know, find a good job, you know, make money, all those things. So my brain, even though I also too, in my magnet high school, there was also a focus on arts, but it was much more like literary arts, not anything, you know, no visual arts. Okay. So it was not something that had ever occurred to me in my life. So I think I needed to kind of go through a little bit of transition to understand what was even artistically possible to me. So from the fruits of my labor standpoint, I still was very much in the mind of like, okay, I'm going to be doing all this work. I'm going to be working hard. I'm going to put in 60, 70 hours in a week. And at the end of the week, I'm going to be able to say, okay, I got this thing done. That's like on the checklist of the goals or the objectives of what we're trying to do. And I'm going to be able to check it off and say, yep, I did it.
Like that.
And there's so much of not having that ability in creative producing.
Yep.
Like you can do the 60, 70 hour week, and then you can look at your week and be like, what progress did I actually make? I mean, you have to kind of define that for yourself in a lot of ways, but there's not necessarily going to be the tangibles like the tangibles I wanted to be able to have at the end of every week in that part of my life.
I like it. Achievement.
Yeah.
Well, I saw this for sure. And one of the reasons why I reached out to you on social media, by the way, this is another great example of the power of social media on the platform that I still call Twitter. I tweeted at Yolanda after seeing her on HBO's new iteration of the show called Project Greenlight. Now, I had seen Project Greenlight in its first 2 iterations years ago, and it was a very different show. And now it's been rebooted with Issa Rae and her company. Yeah. And Yolanda was a producer on the film called Gray Matter, which they were making during this season of Project Greenlight. So let's watch the trailer to that, and then let's talk about your experience working with the selected director, Miko Winbush. So stand by, everybody, for the trailer of Project Greenlight.
Greenlight? We are bringing back Project Greenlight. Go. Do you think we're going to do it justice?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, based off of...
Day one, you're very confident.
Project Greenlight is a documentary about what it takes to be a filmmaker.
Action! We received thousands of submissions from all over the country.
You are one of our final directors.
You almost gave us a heart attack.
This time, we're doing things a little bit differently.
It's about time the world sees how many dope woman directors there are.
I'm a visionary.
We're literally going to win an Oscar. I'm not playing with you guys.
The young people are so confident.
It's unfortunately only pick one.
If I want it, I'm gonna take it.
Miko.
You're in the big leagues now.
This happens to other people. This doesn't happen to me.
I wish your mother was here to see it.
Yeah, she'd be happy.
I hope she realizes this is not going to be a walk in the park.
It's about putting in the work.
I don't need to fake it.
The casting, it is really going to change the movie.
I mean, I don't know. Do we have a
I'm going to be honest. You can't just say no. They're the studio. They're paying for this.
There were issues between the film crew and the series crew.
Yeah, just closed the door on my face.
It's getting very hard to keep them on shit.
I know what I want to do in my head, and I think they're all concerned.
I couldn't tell if Miko was delivering.
I'm a little nervous, America. I'm nervous.
This is a really big deal. The studio can pull the plug at any point.
We have an issue. You okay?
We have an ambulance standby.
We just lost power.
What else could go wrong?
That show had
compelling trailer. Yeah.
Isn't it? It's such good music too. I mean,
yes,
it's a compelling show. So if you have not watched it, watch it. We're probably going to just do a little spoiling of some things. But so Yolanda, you were on the show as a producer, not with Issa Rae or Max, but you came on as a kind of a separate entity. So let's talk about your experience, because I loved, you made some statements on social media, and that's why I reached out to you. So again, thank you for coming on our show to talk about this. This is really great. I learned so much by watching behind the scenes stuff, but can you just share a little bit? It was like exposing all of the processes, all of the challenges of making a movie from every element. It's not easy to make a movie. So where are you at now as you're kind of like a little bit far removed? It's been out for about a month or two, Gray Matter, is that right?
Yeah, right around a month.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Wow. I will tell you, it's interesting. So we all went into it because of the fact that it was the 5th season.
Was it 5th season? I think I said 2. I was wrong.
Season.
Okay, wow. Okay.
The 5th season. So depending on how you talk to, like I went into it being like, oh, everybody knows what this is. It's Project Greenlight. People getting involved with a little bit of trepidation about the always on camera, always on mic aspect, and like, especially, in this maybe more involved day and age where people understand that if they say something that's not great or they do something that's not great, that could, we're now in cancel culture kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to come at it from that, but I was excited to do it, and it was reboot, like you say, from Issa Rae and Hoorae's team. And we had one thing that I was so excited about was the fact that all of the directors being considered were women.
Mm-hmm.
And we, in that first, you kind of see it in the trailer, in our first episode, we narrowed down about 25 finalists to the 10 finalists.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of talent in all these women was so invigorating to me and so exciting. And I was so happy to see it. But I was also, I said at the time, it made me very angry because I was like, I hear too much about, we want to hire women, but we can't find them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, we're having a hard time picking between these 10 people when it came down to 10. And we had a hard time narrowing it down to the 10. And I only saw like the last 25. There were a lot more and I actually ended up meeting by happenstance someone who didn't make it to the 25, and then I later found out about someone else that I know who didn't make it to and I'm like, there's so many people out there who are available and are not working, their phones aren't ringing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was super upset to hear, or to be like confronted with, actual evidence that, there's plenty of people out there that we should be hiring. So super glad to see that. Was very excited to pick Miko. You don't see in the show, but we agonized over that decision. I mean, they kind of talk about it. Issa says, it took longer than I thought it was for us to make the final decision, but we agonized over a last, handful of people. But I was, well, I joked to Miko. I was confident in our choice. I mean, we got down to 2 that we bantered back and forth. And I did drive away, and I was like, I tell Miko all the time, I was like, what did we do? but immediately I was confident in it, and I had my eye on her anyway from her submissions and other things. But I was immediately, upon starting to work with her, I felt very, very confident. And so it was great to work with her. I think she's a great talent. The show, like you said, shows the enormous challenges of making a film, especially when you're in a situation where you're going at it with a starting place that everybody agrees is not a great starting place, i.e. the script. And in the end, I just said to someone else who was involved in the production, actually involved in the series, that the task that we gave Miko was enormous from all standpoints under normal circumstances for a seasoned director. But she did it as a first-time feature director with cameras and mics, constantly, recording and picking up everything that she did. And we ended up with a good, solid film that I think is doing well on Max. And the fact that that is the result is, I say, pretty freaking remarkable. And I congratulate her for being able to do it. And she never lost her ish at all. So, like,
she's so chill. I admire her so much. Her demeanor, I was like, I need a little bit of that in my life, because she just was like,
sometimes she's too chill. I mean,
chill,
I've told her that before. I'm like, okay. Unfortunately, and one of the points that I made on social is that this business ideally has room for all kinds of people with all kinds of ways they walk around in the world, and all kinds of personalities and approaches and ways that they interact with people. I personally appreciated how Miko did. But there are, I think also too, in our business, people respond to very demonstrative and forceful and vocal and in your face and kind of lack of a better word, very demanding type personalities in the role of leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I still want to hold hope that we can have all different kinds of people. But at the same time, there are the scenarios in which it's called for to be very, I don't know, I guess demonstrative or clear and vocal. Because, you know, my husband and I have joked, like, in a vacuum, someone's going to fill it. If you don't, you know, claim it and demand it yourself, then someone else is going to put what they want in that space.
I see what you're saying. To create those boundaries and then hold those boundaries and to be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Now, just to segue a little bit, I know Tony has questions about the film. I want to, because I know our time is winding down.
Yeah.
How beautiful of opportunity that she gets to work with someone that's seasoned as you. And I would assume that a lifetime friendship, because the bond that you guys had going through this experience.
Yes.
And her being able to tap into you as a mentor, as a friend. For others who are looking to be producers or aspiring producers, or maybe early on in their career, for them to approach you to become a mentee, what would be your suggestion for someone to start a genuine relationship with someone at your level?
Yeah, that's a tough question because, of course, everybody desires that and wants that because it's a pathway towards, you know, making it or getting an entry and getting in. And it's a delicate balance because there's so many people who want to do it, especially for me, because, and conversation Tony and I were having before we started of, I'm very much in a mode right now in my life in the last 10 years of making human connections with people. So it's a delicate balance for me. And I also really love in this moment being a mentor or being what's making me feel good about myself or feeling love for the business and for the world and for myself is being the person that I wish I had had when I had started. So, but at the same time, you can't, you know, it's like, I used to really hate where studios be like, we won't take unsolicited material, or you can't cold call, or you can't do it. And it's like, you know, all of those kind of guardrails are there for a reason, because from a volume standpoint and all of those things, it's impossible to be able to open the door and open floodgates to everybody. But what I've recommended to people is find circles of people within that person's, you know, what have they done? Like, what movies have they done? Maybe reach out to someone who was involved with that and like start a relationship with that. And then try and do coffees with people, like, you know, suggest things where it's kind of agendaless, where it's really about making a human connection and getting to know someone, as opposed to, I need you to read my script and it's so amazing and I want you to come on and be a producer on it. And it needs to start from kind of that standpoint of, I want a relationship with you. Mm-hmm. That's my advice, really. Thank you.
It's so hard to just, even like me at my level, sometimes I'll feel people will get in my DMs and expect something of me. And I'm like, I don't even know who you are. I would love to have a relationship with you first. Let's talk a little bit. Let's go out to coffee before you ask me to cast you in my next movie. Like, geez. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more, because again, one of the reasons why I loved, you know, following you and reaching out to you was I think I saw your protectiveness as a producer. You really came around Miko, and you know, you nudged her when you needed to nudge her. You protected her when you needed to protect her, and that's really what I love about the producer relationship is
absolutely
how you can do all those things. So, what are your expectations when you get into a relationship with a director? What are some things like do you have them in a document, or is it just kind of like, let's have a conversation? Here's some unsaid things I want to see happen, or you kind of figured out along the way? What are some of those?
No, I think what I would kind of pat myself on the back about is I have a skill set of understanding people, like being able to absorb like who they are and the strengths and weaknesses, and even a lot of like the unsaid things, or maybe the things they don't want you to know about them, or just really understanding who that person is. So my approach to producing is with each different artist, each different director, is finding out in that particular project and in that moment, where are the things that I need to do? What can I do that's going to be additive for them and their process and what they're bringing? How can I be supportive? How can I add? How can I protect, like you say, and be just all of the, run around. I always say my role as a producer is to provide all the tools for my painter. Like I make the analogy of a painter, like beautiful, Picasso person. And I'm going to find the space for them to paint in. And I'm going to bring the canvases and I'm going to bring all the paint and I'm going to bring everything they need. So that all they have to do is think about painting.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do. And that's what I aim to do. And that's always going to be very specific to who my painter is and who they are and what they're bringing to the whole thing. And so I'm always immediately like, okay, who is this person? What do they need from me to be able to be their best selves?
Great. Producers, you hear it. Yep. So you got to be flexible and adaptable. I love it. Well, Yolanda, oh my gosh, the time is already up. We could definitely talk for a long time. So hopefully we'll stay connected to you. But we want to hear your Brave fave for the week.
Brave faves. TV shows, films, books, songs, technology, clothing, podcast, food, and more. These are a few of our favorite people, places, and things. Brave faves.
I'll go first. I just watched a movie on Netflix called I Used to Be Famous. I guess it came out last year and I missed it, but it was really kind of a cool, small indie movie that I always love movies that have entertainment storylines. It's something that I enjoy learning and watching. But this was a British film about a guy who was in a boy band, and 20 years later he's trying to see if he can start his music career again. And it was really cool because it's a small story about this 30-40 something year old guy who then connects with a teenage kid who's autistic who wants to be a drummer, and how they intermingle into each other's lives. Really fun, some funny moments, but I thought really also heartwarming. So that's my Brave fave for the week. Yolanda, what's your Brave fave?
I was struggling for a minute to think of something, but I have to say, I almost want to kick myself for saying this. I so did not want to go see Barbie for a lot of reasons. There's so many reasons why I did not want to go see it that I'm not going to cover, but I did enjoy the film for reasons that we don't have time to cover. But my Brave fave was the much talked about monologue that America Ferrera gives about how hard it is to be a woman. And encapsulate, I think she hit every point, and it was so thorough, and it so gave all the things you needed to know about why it's hard and why it's so stupid that it's hard. So that's definitely my Brave fave.
Go Barbie, go. All right, that's good. Priscilla, what's yours?
I went to the Chinese theater this past weekend to show my short film, I Used to Love Her. And so this week I have been binge watching Rush Hour series, like Rush Hour 1, Rush Hour 2, Rush Hour 3, and just been watching them over and over again. And I will say my favorite out of all of them is Rush Hour 2, but I do love Rush Hour 1. And just the writing that they had, how Chris Tucker truly bodied the character in Rush Hour 1. That's my week fave right there. That's my Brave fave for the week. If you have not,
you definitely see why Chris Tucker became the big Chris Tucker that he is.
He embodied that role, and it was just a fun ride. And so, if you haven't seen it, if you're a younger generation, because I think it might have came out before you, check out Rush Hour 1, check out Rush Hour 2. Hilarious. And if you haven't seen it in a while, go watch it. Just go get a good laugh and feel the brotherhood, and just have a good old movie.
Awesome. Okay,
Love
cool.
it.
Well, thank you both. Do not go away. Let me just say thank you to our producer, Amy Cohen. I really appreciate Amy and all the work that she does to make this podcast happen, with communicating with our guests and creating all the live stream links for us. So thank you, Amy Cohen out of Austin, Texas, our intern, Jessica, who will take clips from this episode and put it on our social media. So make sure you're following us on our social media at BraveMaker.org so you don't miss some of the highlights of the show and our other 201 episodes that we've done. And also our podcast editor, Barnell Amos, and our social media producer, Carrie Alley out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Next week, our 203rd episode, we will be talking to screenwriter Shelley Dennis, who has been out on the picket lines for the past 100 days. Shelley is a screenwriter in the WGA currently, is on The Connors Show. So don't miss that episode next week, Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, Priscilla and Yolanda, thank you so much. Real quick, before we go, where do you want people to follow you? Go ahead and shout out your social media.
Okay, well, you can find me at my website, YolandaCochran.com. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm not calling it that other name. At Rat in a Wheel with underscores between the words, or you can search Yolanda Cochran and you can find it at Rat in a Wheel. There you go. And you can find me on Instagram at Yolanda T. Cochran.
Woo!
Yes, hey guys, Priscilla Lamb. You can find me on Instagram at Ms. M.S. CRISTILLALAM. Miss Priscilla Lamb.
All right, well, that's our show for today, everybody. Let's follow these makers, be supportive of one another. And, you know, we just talked about it, relationships. You never know how connecting and hearing someone's story, following them, whether it's this year or 5 years from now, it all happens when we connect and support one another. And we want you to be brave makers, because brave stories change the world, and you are the story. Thank you so much, Yolanda. Thank you so much, Priscilla. If you've got just two minutes, don't go away, because we'll do a quick little screenshot. But everybody else, we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at BraveMaker.org. Like, subscribe, and share. To become a monthly donor, text the word BraveMaker to 44321 or go to bravemaker.com/donate. Thanks for tuning in.